World Cup qualifying is hit. There are teams that are guaranteed to be going to the World Cup now that weren't before, and we're not even done with the window. I know a lot of people hate on the international windows, but if you're going to have an international window, have one with a shitload of World Cup qualifying in it, because that just makes things so much better. We'll start with the madhouse that is Africa. This all kicked off on Wednesday. We're going to go result by result. Most of them we're going to kind of skip because most of them don't matter nearly as much. But some of these results are saving certain big teams. Another one, other versions of these results are dooming big teams. So which ones are doomed and which ones are still alive, basically? Well, speaking of alive, Madagascar has managed to absolutely cook. Madagascar has shown up and dropped the 4-1 win at Central African Republic. And having been a long time student of the game here, if you're able to win by 3 goals on the road in Africa, you take that. That is, you take that. You gotta take that. All right. It is not easy to win comfortably on the road in Africa. And that puts Madagascar in second place, which is a very big surprise. Now, second place is not anywhere near the World Cup yet. If you're a top 4 second place team, you go into a playoff, and then out of that playoff, you attempt to then be the one team that wins that playoff, and then you go to the Intercontinental playoff. So second place is basically not making it, but what this does do is keep the pressure on Ghana. Ghana showed up and played the worst team in the group, Chad, and they did manage to pick up a 5-0 win there, so no big surprise. Ghana at home, defending the home turf. But Madagascar is in this. They are alive. The problem for Comoros is they are not. This was a very, very, very sad result for me. I mean, it's great for Mali, right? But Mali already kind of blew it. They had 4 points from their first 4 or 5 points from their first 4 matches. They get a 3-0 win on the road that basically sinks Comoros. Comoros is on 9 points. They're 3 off of Ghana right now. This keeps Mali alive. In my opinion, the most talented team that has never made it to the World Cup. They had a near miss in their final World Cup playoff against Tunisia last time around. They get a 3-0 win at Comoros, so they're on 8 points. Still 4 points off of Ghana, but they have the firepower to win the next 5 matches they play. I think if they do that, I think if you drop a solid, if they get to 23 points, which is what 5 wins would do for them, I think they go to the World Cup in place of Ghana. So Ghana is in a very uncomfortable situation because of Madagascar's win and because of Mali's win. Instead of, let's say Madagascar loses and Mali loses, then you basically only have 2 teams that are in pursuit as we head into the second group of 5 matches. Now you're looking at a situation where you have 4 teams that are within 4 points of the top of the group. And that top of the group spot is automatic. Bingo, bango, bongo, you're in the World Cup. And all 4 of those teams will believe they have a chance. I think Comoros being so lifeless at home against Mali is going to hurt them. Madagascar is a sleeper team, type of team that's normally able to make it to AFCONs pretty regularly. If they can get that one lucky result, it is possible that we could have Madagascar, grooving it and move it all the way to the World Cup, which would just be freaking awesome. Other results from the opening day: Cameroon drew Eswatini, which is what the fuck, right? Like, what even is that result? This is the country formerly known as Swaziland, all right? And Cameroon is playing the team that is bottom of the group, and they show up and just drop a draw. Their 3rd draw in 5 matches. Cameroon is an enigma, a complete and utter enigma. All they had to do was win at Eswatini. Right, but this is why I'm saying, if you can win by 3 goals on the road in Africa, anywhere, you take it. Because even Cameroon on the road against Eswatini, that's not a guaranteed win. And it's important. It's not like Cameroon's running away with this. Because of those 3 draws in 5 matches, they drew Angola, they drew Libya, they beat Cape Verde, but that doesn't matter because Cape Verde's actually putting wins together. Cape Verde actually managed to beat Eswatini, which is like the difference maker. Cape Verde's match, they came out and actually picked up a win over Mauritius in their most recent match, 84th minute goal to give them that dub, by the way, and that puts them in first. We have played half the matches. Everybody's played each other once. Cape Verde's in first. Cape Verde's never been to the World Cup before, and now they can taste it. Libya's in it. Angola's in it. They're all within 3 points of the top, and the goal difference is a little distorted to Cameroon because they've got a couple of blowout wins against Cape Verde and Mauritius, but they're not doing the business in the other matches. They freaking drew Eswatini. So this is completely up for grabs for Angola, for Libya, for Cape Verde. Libya and Angola had an opportunity to try and go to the top of the group. In fact, if Libya had won their match, They would have gone to the top of the group, but this ended up being a 1-1 draw between Libya and Angola. It was a huge 93rd minute goal right here for the Angolan national team to make sure that they didn't give those 3 points to Libya and they kept themselves in it on the road. So big missed opportunity for Libya. They could have been first in the group right here if they'd actually managed to get that ball and or to keep that ball from going into the back of the net. But there's all sorts of drama like this all over Africa. And right now, Cape Verde's on top. We're looking at a second group where there are 4 teams that are very much alive. If you can go out and get 3, maybe 4 wins in your final 5 matches. Like, let's say Angola goes and beats everybody except for Cameroon. That probably is enough, right? Because this is a mess. Nobody's comfortable. Cameroon's clearly not able to separate up at the top. There is one team, however, that is separating, and that's Tunisia. They won 1-0 at Liberia. They beat everybody 1-0. They don't concede any goals. 7 goals scored, none conceded. They're top of the group with 13 points. Right? They're doing the job that's, these sorts of teams that normally make the World Cup are supposed to do. Tunisia has a low ceiling, but a very high floor. They play very, very well for the parts that they have. They get very consistently good results in a way that very few other teams at the national team level are able to get. They are a tough out. They are not going to give it to you. They know exactly how they want to play. That's how they beat Mali in the World Cup playoff last time. And now they're top of the group. They've only dropped 1 match, and it was a 0-0 draw with Namibia, who is clearly the second best team in the group, right? They shouldn't be. I made a whole other video about how Equatorial Guinea should be. They had to forfeit their freaking 2 matches. They should get those matches back. They went out and beat Sao Tome and Principe. If they got those 2 wins back, they'd be on 12 points. They'd be chasing Tunisia down, and it would be an epic last set of matches. But Namibia, to their credit, they got the free win even in a match they lost on the field against Equatorial Guinea. They're playing well. They've been to an AFCON recently. It was their first ever appearance at an AFCON, so Namibia is still certainly lacking in depth. But they've got belief in a way that they haven't had it before. Liberia, Malawi, they're kind of falling off at this point. Sao Tome and Principe. Happy to be here. Congratulations, man. Mozambique beating Uganda 3-0. This sets up potentially a very spicy little showdown in Group G. It's another one of those groups where we're down to 2 teams basically already. Algeria and Mozambique are tied. Uganda, Guinea, Botswana, they all dropped out. Guinea, I don't know, like Cameroon draws Eswatini, Guinea, who made the quarterfinals of AFCON, giving Somalia, a country without a functioning central government, a point, their first point of qualifying, with a 0-0 draw at home. Yeah, that's Guinea's got the same thing going on as the Gambia, where they are definitely talented enough to beat the best teams in Africa, but they just lack the consistency for one of a million reasons. Who knows what it is, but they always seem to pop up with a result like, oh, we just drew Somalia. Like, if Guinea wins that match, they're 3 points off the top of the league, right? They are still within striking distance, but you go out and give me a draw against Somalia, you might as well, you just pack it in at that point. Algeria needed to win. Obviously, they went on the road against Botswana, and they snagged a 3-1 win. So that's like the necessary dub for Algeria to stay up top. Algeria's only loss was Guinea, just to like illustrate the point I'm making. They did manage to beat Mozambique, though. That's going to be the key match in the second time around, and that's actually coming up in the next couple of days. So if you're looking for a match that's going to be freaking huge, that if Mozambique is able to win, then they would totally change the expected trajectory of this group, right? Because we're expecting Algeria to be able to win that match. But there is real World Cup pressure on that match. It's Mozambique and Algeria, 5 matches left. They are tied on points at the top of the group. Anything can happen. One little deflection of the ball, and Mozambique with the AK-47 on their flag is going to be in first place in this group. So Algeria does not have a huge margin for error yet because of the ability that Mozambique has shown up to this point. Sierra Leone with a win over Guinea-Bissau, which brings us into a new group, a group where you find the first and really only fully comfortable team in World Cup qualifying in Africa, the team that I believe is going to, kind of finalize its qualification first. That team is Egypt. They have 13 points in their first 5 matches, and the pursuit has kind of fallen apart. You would hope, if you're a lover of competitiveness and stuff, it'd be Burkina Faso, and they did show up and beat Djibouti, but they've also drawn Sierra Leone and drawn Guinea-Bissau, and if they wanted to put up a really serious chase, as Burkina Faso is talented enough to do, they have made the Final Four of AFCON in very recent memory. They needed to not do that. They managed to avoid doing that. The win that brought us in here, Sierra Leone over Guinea-Bissau, means that Sierra Leone does have a chance to compete for that second spot. They are right next to Burkina Faso. Either one of those teams is going to have to win a few more matches if they want to be one of the top 4 second-place teams. They're going to need a lot of points in the second round, but Guinea-Bissau is basically out of the race at this point at 6 points, and I would have said that they were better than Sierra Leone. So Kai Kamara and company with Sierra Leone, maybe they can actually pull something off here. Benin and Zimbabwe, and this one pissed me off. This one pissed me off because this is my favorite group. And I got nothing against Zimbabwe. I really don't have anything against Zimbabwe. This one pissed me off because Benin had it. 2 goals in the first 35 minutes. I freaking saw this. I was tracking this on my phone. 2 goals in the first 35 minutes, and then Zimbabwe pulls it back. Zimbabwe's not in this. They should be. They're a decent team, but they're not in this. Right? This is their 3rd draw. They don't have a win in their first 5 matches. Right, but Benin, if they get a win, they're racing for the top of this group right now. But they didn't get it. They blew it. They had the 2-goal lead. And you know who steps up there is South Africa. They beat the country that is quite literally inside them, Lesotho. They beat them 2-0 in order to move themselves into the top of the group. Lesotho very briefly was in the running towards the top of the group, but they have since lost 2 consecutive matches. So they are now back behind Nigeria, who you might not have noticed when you were looking at this table because you just assume that Nigeria is going to be further up a group. Well, Nigeria had a do-or-die situation going into their first match of this window. They had to win at Rwanda, and Osimhen scored 2 first-half goals to make sure that they did win at Rwanda. Now, of course, they are still behind Rwanda in the freaking table, but they at least stayed alive. They are still 4 points off the top of the group with South Africa, and they are still sitting on 6 points in their first 5 matches, with the win over Rwanda being their only win in this entire first round of matches against any of these teams. So Benin fumbled a big opportunity. Rwanda, if they managed to hold off Nigeria in that match, that would have been freaking massive for them. I don't think Rwanda has the firepower to actually make a run at this. They're just really a spoiler candidate at this point. But it would have been fun to keep them as, wow, they managed to get a draw against Nigeria, and that keeps them 2 points off the top, keep the dream alive a little bit longer. I think that dream is probably dead. But what do I know? Rwanda did beat South Africa. They're top of the group right now. If they can manage to somehow do that again and crap out another result or 2, anything's possible in this group because we have 5 teams within 5 points at the top of the group and 3 teams, including Nigeria, that I believe have a chance to finish first in this group. Maybe Rwanda proves me wrong, but Nigeria did get the win that it absolutely had to get, or else its World Cup qualifying was over. Its next match is Zimbabwe. This is a huge opportunity for Nigeria to spin out a 6-point window, which it desperately needs more than life itself to stay alive here. South Africa's upcoming match is going to be against Benin, which is a huge sorting hat match. Benin wins that. They're on 11. South Africa's on 10. Nigeria's on 9. And we are setting up for a spicy Final 4 matches. If South Africa wins it, they're 5 points clear of Benin with 4 to go. And Nigeria has a chance to jump above Benin. So huge matches are happening in Group C. Like just absolutely massive matches are happening. Speaking of massive matches, Gabon. Yes, Gabon. This is the Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang's nation. You see, Aubameyang retired internationally, but then he was talked out of it a year later by the country's president, and now Gabon has a freaking chance. Because Gabon has actually managed to play 6 matches in qualifying so far. They just completed a match against Kenya in which Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang was able to score, and he scored a brace, actually. They jumped out to what would eventually be a 2-1 win, and because they played 6 matches, they are ahead of Ivory Coast. This is like, if you're going to be a spoiler, if you're going to put legit pressure on, you can't drop points against anyone. They lost at Ivory Coast. That's the toughest match they have in the rest of this group. They've won every other match. That World Cup is sneaking up on them. And Ivory Coast, the number of points they have right now, you'd be thinking they're good to be a top 4 second place team if it comes to it, but they do not want to have to go through the meat grinder that is the second place position in this qualifying format. They took care of business. Not like they're playing poorly, right? All they did was draw Kenya. That's the only thing that has knocked Ivory Coast out of first place. The match that Aubameyang just helped Gabon win That was the draw for Ivory Coast. They beat Burundi 1-0, which, again, any win on the road in Africa is a good one. They have not conceded a goal. I kind of feel bad for them, right? They've played as well as Egypt has. The problem is the team in their group that's trying to play spoiler is just doing a hell of a better job than Burkina Faso is. The Gambia, a team that I definitely thought had a chance to be a spoiler, they drew Kenya 3-3 in their first match of this window. And that means that they were probably sunk before that. They are definitely sunk now. They needed Gabon to lose, trying to open up that second spot. The Gambia's got multiple players in Serie A, very talented team. No idea what's going on with their national team, why they can't put it together as a national team. Doesn't make any sense. But if you haven't noticed, in every single one of these African groups, there is a chance that a pretty out-of-the-way team that's never made it before can get in. And I believe at least one or two of those is going to take flight in Gabon. The way they're playing and the fact that they've already gone and got that fifth win in 6 matches, they might just be like the favored one to actually be able to do that. We fast forward to the next day, which was Friday, and then you see another group get started, which was old Dr. freaking Congo. Now, I expected Dr. Congo to be able to compete for the top of this group, and they did get a 1-0 win over South Sudan, but that is not the main attraction of this group. The main attraction of this group is the fact that Senegal on the road in Benghazi against Sudan. Benghazi, of course, is not in Sudan. Sudan has a civil war going on right now. They can't play their home matches in Sudan. So they're playing a home match at a neutral site at home against Senegal. Senegal can't beat them. This is the one that Sudan needed. This was the showdown. Sudan had been running top of this group, and Senegal had been puttering around, but you were just sitting there thinking that Senegal was going to be able to actually go beat Sudan when all the cards were on the table. Well, guess what? They didn't. And now Sudan is sitting top of the group, a nation blasted by civil war, a nation that is made up almost entirely of players in its domestic league or one or two other North African leagues. The top couple of clubs from Sudan have moved to the National League of Mauritania, which is like super far away from Sudan, all the way on the west coast of Africa. That's where their clubs are now playing to try and stay sharp and compete in everything, but also to keep their national team sharp for this. They've only conceded 1 goal in 5 matches. These dudes are playing. This group is not easy, right? There are 5 teams that have very recently been in an AFCON. In this group, Mauritania, Togo, Senegal, DR Congo, Sudan. Sudan is top of that? Yeah, all right. They are, though. I don't even know what to make of that. Like, I legitimately don't. It's one of those national teams that you just really know nothing about because they don't. There isn't like a Sudanese player in MLS or even MLS, not let alone Serie A, Premier League, Bundesliga, La Liga, right? They're not anywhere. But clearly they're playing at a level where a team that made the World Cup knockouts, a team that has won in AFCON recently in Senegal, cannot reliably beat them in a group that is annoying. The Senegal's drawn all the decent teams in this group except for Mauritania. They drew DR Congo, they drew Togo, and now they've drawn Sudan. They only managed to beat Mauritania, right? That wasn't convincing. That was 1-0 on the road. This is danger time for Senegal. The golden generation of Senegal that's carried them into the top 20 on the world rankings. Okay, the round of 16 at the World Cup, an African championship. The stars fading. I mean, this draw was brutal, especially considering apparently Sudan has hands. The next match, by the way, for Sudan is against South Sudan, the one team in this group that sucks. Right? Obviously, a huge derby, right? Previous civil war was involved in this. Right? But if they're able to win, I'm assuming they're playing in Benghazi again, Sudan's going to be sitting on 14 points after 6 matches. The belief will be there. DR Congo's playing Mauritania, Senegal's playing Togo. All of those 3 teams going in, Sudan, DR Congo, and Senegal, are going to be needing a win there. Togo's basically out of it. They're 6 points out of the second place. They would need a crazy run with a lot of wins. They're just, a spoiler. They've drawn everybody except for DR Congo, which is hilarious. Togo, the master of the draw. But out of all the groups, right, the Nigeria group's my favorite. This might be my second favorite. I mean, just an absolutely absurd set of events going on. And then to one other team that is definitely rocking comfortably, that would be Morocco. One, they have less matches. Eritrea pulled out of qualifying. They aren't playing. They haven't played a national team game, honestly, in quite a long time. And that means Morocco has less matches. They only have 8 matches, and they have less room for error, I guess you could say, but they're cruising comfortably. They've won all 4 of their matches. They beat Niger, they beat Congo, they beat Tanzania, they beat Zambia. The Niger match, the most recent one, little sweaty, 91st minute goal on the road against Niger. Niger was playing basically to try and keep this group interesting. If Niger managed to not lose this, they could have kept the points closer. But whoever finishes second place in this group, I think, is probably screwed unless they're doing some math to try and expand the number of points to make it fair. But you basically have to win this group if you're going to advance. Morocco, obviously the heavy favorite, is the only African team to ever make the last 4 at a World Cup, happening at the last World Cup, and they're playing like it. There's been no drop-off for Morocco. They're not caught up in any of the tomfoolery in Africa, and this group is basically done and dusted. That brings us to the one you've really been waiting for. Oceania. The final 4 in Oceania showing down. The first matchup was New Caledonia against Tahiti. Now remember, this is a final 4. If you win this match, you at least book a ticket to the Intercontinental Playoff, which means all you got to do is win 2 matches and you're in the World Cup. New Caledonia's booked that place. They beat Tahiti. They beat them 3-0. I mean, we don't even have stats available for this match, but they went out there and dominated a team that at one point beat New Zealand to make it to the Confed Cup. New Caledonia has emerged as the preeminent threat here. And the team that is definitely not the preeminent threat is Fiji, because New Zealand put Fiji to the sword 7-0, setting up a one-off showdown to go to the World Cup, which is tremendously exciting. It happens tomorrow. It's New Caledonia against New Zealand, a battle of the news. If New Caledonia pulls off that upset, we have now entered a world where New Caledonia needs to win one match. They are obviously a big underdog. They go to the World Cup. They are one match away from the World Cup. That's special. I love the fact that in Oceania now, you get a full spot so that there is a chance for one of these teams to pull off the big upset and get themselves onto the world stage. That's just very cool to me. New Zealand obviously is hoping to turn that one ticket into their automatic spot, and that would send New Caledonia to the Intercontinental Playoff to get that one team from Africa that comes out of the playoff, a couple CONCACAF teams, South American team, right? Teams from all over, Asia as well, going to the Intercontinental Playoff in the new format. So they'd have to battle their way through a random hodgepodge of like Jordan and Trinidad and Tobago, those sorts of teams in order to get to the World Cup. Who knows how New Caledonia stacks up against those sorts of teams, because honestly, they've never really had the opportunity to play against teams like that before. But who knows? Maybe it'll be New Zealand there if New Caledonia can pull this off. But those are the results in Oceania. As for Asia, the unbelievably weird group has finally gotten a little more normal. Australia found itself. Indonesia brought in a new coach, backfired. All of these teams, if you remember, were tied at 6 or 7 points, right? Australia was on 7. Australia, Indonesia, Bahrain, and China were all on 6. That was the way this was all set up. It was a crazy close group. Well, a 5-1 home win against Indonesia really, really separates the cream from the crop, right? I mean, we have now separated the actual team that can go to the World Cup and make the knockouts in Australia from where Indonesia is right now. Now, Indonesia had a lot of reason to believe. They were coming off the win against Saudi Arabia, but that reason to believe is gone. It is going to be difficult for them. They've got, 3 matches left. One of them is going to be against Bahrain. That is a huge 6-pointer to try and at least get in the 4th position for the playoff. But Australia is not comfortable either, because a big win for Saudi Arabia. This was not like a complete demolition on the score sheet. It was a complete demolition on the stat sheet. 80% possession. China could, chasing the ball all over the place. They got a red card in the first half, and Al Dawsari, a guy who's been with the national team for quite a long time. I remember playing with him on the World Cup video games. He puts the ball in the back of the net. Saudi Arabia gets the feeling, well, Australia woke up. Saudi Arabia is doing just enough to try and meet expectations here, but the top 2 spots are the only automatic spots for the World Cup. So Japan, Australia right now are occupying those 2 spots. Japan has clinched with a 2-0 win over Bahrain, which is why Bahrain is sitting down at 6 points still. They were not able to pull off the upset against Asia's best team. And Japan is going to the World Cup. They've clinched. They're going. Mathematically impossible for them to not be going. But one of Australia or Saudi Arabia is going to end up in the playoff. And honestly, it would be a big surprise in turn of events if it wasn't Australia, because it's always Australia that's going to the playoff somehow. I have no idea. And one of Indonesia, Bahrain, or China is going to backdoor a playoff spot in 4th position. So that's what it feels like now that the separation has come in. Australia plays China, big 3-point opportunity. Saudi Arabia plays Japan. That's tough. Right, that's obviously that's just a super happy, not fun time. So Australia gets a win. Saudi Arabia loses. Australia's got a 4-point advantage with 2 matches to go. One of those matches would be against Saudi Arabia, so that could get super epic. I mean, we'll see how it plays out. The rest of Asia wasn't necessarily as entertaining, but we did get this incredibly interesting result where South Korea drew Oman. This keeps South Korea from being able to try to, depending on results, be able to clinch a World Cup spot this time around. They have not clinched it. And in fact, they might start to get a little nervous with these back-to-back draws against Palestine and Oman, 2 teams they should be beating, right? Because they are only 3 points clear of a playoff spot. The World Cup wouldn't be complete without South Korea. It's one of those nations that's just always there, and they are playing with fire a little bit. Jordan, looking good. They beat Palestine 3-1. Jordan, I even forgot this, made that miraculous run to the Asian Cup final recently. The AFC final, like the actual championship match of Asia. Jordan was there. They made it all the way to that point. A tournament that South Korea has not even won since 1960. Jordan got all the way to the freaking final, and they're starting to look like it. I mean, they've got 8 points from their last 4 matches. They're putting it together, and they're right now, if it ended right now, Jordan is in an automatic spot to go through. And they're there because Iraq dropped points, which is great for South Korea, by the way. Iraq drew against Kuwait, and this was excruciatingly painful for Kuwait because Kuwait had a chance, right, to make huge gains here. And Iraq comes into this at home against Kuwait thinking they need to win. They're down 2-0 in the 93rd minute. All right, they scored 2 stoppage time goals to pull out a point here and get to 12, and almost more importantly, choke out Kuwait. That combined with the draw for Oman against South Korea, and Oman has gained a point on Kuwait, and that seemed unbelievable based off the way this looked during the matches themselves. It's a group that was not that interesting. It was a group that I thought was South Korea and everybody else, but now it's getting spicy. We've got 2 groups of 3. These guys are battling for their automatic spot at the World Cup, and these guys are battling for their World Cup not to end. The door is still open for Palestine. They're going to have to pick up a win against Iraq in their next match. That's going to be very difficult, but Palestine did make the Asian Cup knockouts in the last Asian Cup. They are not a team that is afraid of those big moments. They've got big moment experience in a way that they never really have had before, and maybe that's going to help them out. And then in the third group, there are only 3 groups at this stage in Asia. Uzbekistan did it. They took care of business. It wasn't overly pretty, but they beat Kyrgyzstan 1-0. And that's what they needed to do, because now Uzbekistan is sitting here looking at an open door to go to their first ever World Cup. Kyrgyzstan and North Korea are basically out. Just the way all of these matches went, Qatar destroyed North Korea 5-1. The dear leader is certainly not going to be pleased. And the UAE lost to Iran, which was the best case scenario for Uzbekistan because that creates the whole 6-point separation. Now, they are not out of the woods because the 3 teams Uzbekistan hasn't played yet are Qatar, UAE, and Iran. In particular, their next match is going to be against Iran, where the UAE is playing against North Korea and Qatar is playing against Kyrgyzstan, a match that Kyrgyzstan needs to win, or else all of the 4 teams in the top part of this group are going to be guaranteed a spot in at least the Asian playoff going into the next round. Qatar has been horribly disappointing. They turned it on when they absolutely needed to beat North Korea, but this is the 2-time consecutive champion of Asia. Not Japan, not South Korea, not Iran, not Saudi Arabia, not Australia. It's Qatar. They've won 2 straight Asian championships. And yet in World Cup qualifying, they look like they've never seen a ball before. They've given up 18 goals in 7 matches. How is that even possible if you're clearly that good of a team? And now they're letting it slip. Uzbekistan, who's been so close to the World Cup so many times, has taken the reins. Won 5 of their 7 matches, and that's what you got to do. You got to go out and win matches. They've conceded 13 less goals. Iran, by the way, cruising. They haven't guaranteed World Cup yet based off of goal difference, like mathematically. If they can get a point against Uzbekistan. They will mathematically guarantee qualification to the World Cup, as you would expect. But now for your regularly scheduled what the hell's going on in South America. First, we have Paraguay and Chile. Huge 3 points for Paraguay. That keeps Chile down at the bottom of the group, which Bolivia, Venezuela, Peru, they're all incredibly happy, right, that Paraguay won this match. But it also separates Paraguay, right? We're looking at an 18-match season, so 5 matches to go, and Paraguay has a 7-point separation from 7th, which means for the first time in a while, since the Rocky Santa Cruz days, it looks like we're going to see Paraguay at a World Cup. Miggy Almiron and company, they're getting the job done. They're one of 3 teams that hasn't scored at least 10 goals in qualifying. They have 9 goals in 13 matches, which is psychotic. That's insane. It's also good enough. They're kind of crushing. I don't know what happened to Chile. The golden generation's gone. They've completely deteriorated. Ecuador managed to beat Colombia 1-0. They're actually second in the group right now. They're ahead of Brazil in World Cup qualifying. And with 4 losses in their last 5, Colombia continues to leave the door slightly ajar for a stunning run from Bolivia or Venezuela to steal the last automatic World Cup qualifying spot. But to be perfectly honest, Bolivia does not look inspired. They lost at Peru 3-1. Peru obviously was dead in the water on 7 points before they managed to pick up that win. Now they're 3 points away from Bolivia trying to backdoor the Intercontinental playoff spot, which they would get if they managed to get up into 7th. So that was a huge 6-pointer for Bolivia that they managed to drop. And of course, Venezuela, they played their last match against Ecuador. This one was more recent. It was on the 21st, and Ecuador picked up another win because they're absolutely cooking. That just basically keeps this contingent of suck in place. And as long as you're not in the contingent of suck, you're good. World Cup qualifying in South America is about not being in the contingent of suck. And it's basically going to be whoever sucks the least that's going to grab this 7th position. In matches between teams that are basically already in, Brazil beat Colombia 2-1. So Colombia is the one leaving the door open here, and Brazil is at least feeling better. Shout out to Vinicius for scoring a beautiful 99th minute winner in this match and then being subbed off and nearly getting carded for it. We respect all of the Vinicius parts of that. And then there was Argentina beating Uruguay, but both these teams are going to be going to the World Cup. So there's not huge developments there. It's just tune-ups and competitive matches for those types of guys. And now you are all caught up on World Cup qualifying. Congratulations. You made it to the end. You know so much. Now there's a whole other batch of matches that's about to kick off. Go watch those.